Syracuse is pursuing a couple of four-star recruits, plus the Orange still have a couple open scholarships, and we're going to talk about how Syracuse could use them for next season.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Of course, we're always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And shout out to those who serve this country here, the United States. Happy Memorial Day to you all. And on today's show, we are going to discuss how Syracuse still has two open scholarships remaining and how they could use them. Perhaps another linebacker, perhaps another cornerback. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But first, a football recruiting update, because Syracuse has cracked a top 6 and top 7 list for a couple of four-star recruits. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. But before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So Syracuse football is firmly in the mix for a couple of four-star elite recruits. One of them we are going to discuss is a consensus four-star recruit, and the other is a near consensus four-star recruit. The first one that we're going to discuss is Messiah Hampton, 6 foot, 170-pound wide receiver from, you guessed it, Rochester, New York. That's right. So he is a bit of a hometown kid here, and he is a consensus four-star recruit and the top overall player in the state of New York. And he recently released his top 7 list of schools, and thankfully, our beloved Syracuse Orange cracked the top 7 for Messiah Hampton. It's Syracuse, Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, and Miami. So based on those schools pursuing Messiah Hampton, I think you can infer that this is a pretty big-time recruit. This is not your average Northeast kid that might get overlooked here. No. He's got the attention of basically every single big-time program in the country. And he's also got a commitment date set. It's actually pretty soon, Friday, June 13th. So that is 18 days from the time of this recording. That is less than 3 weeks. And here's the latest with Messiah Hampton. Does Syracuse have a chance to land a consensus four-star recruit from the state of New York, right? I think that the Orange have a chance. I think that they are certainly in the mix for a guy like Messiah Hampton. And of course they are. He's from Rochester, New York. This is a hometown kid. That being said, from scouring the internet, it appears that the favorite, at least for right now, is Oregon, according to On3 Steve Wiltfong and a couple of Oregon insiders. Relationships and recruiting, we've talked about this on the podcast before, and we will continue to talk about it because it's really important. And I'm referring to relationships, building trust with these recruits. And Oregon has something that Syracuse used to have. And that is wide receivers coach Ross Douglas. See, Syracuse had Ross Douglas a year ago on staff coaching the wide receivers, and he was recruiting Messiah Hampton. Well, in this offseason, Ross Douglas leaves Syracuse football and he decides to take the Oregon wide receiver coaching job. And well, that relationship between Ross Douglas and Messiah Hampton, it did not dissipate. It's still there. So no wonder why it appears that Oregon is now the favorite to land Messiah Hampton. That being said, the reason why I would not count out Syracuse in this recruitment, aside from just it being very, very close in proximity, Rochester and Syracuse, the Orange are going to get an official visit from him. That's a big deal. They are getting an official visit from Hampton on June 5th, and that is according to 24/7 Sports' visit page for him. So, look, you got him on campus. It's not going to be long until he commits. So, there is Syracuse's chances to potentially land a guy like Messiah Hampton, a consensus 4-star recruit from the state of New York. The other one that Syracuse is in the mix for here as we do this football recruiting update for you all is CJ Hester, a 6'1" defensive back from Cocoa, Florida. He is a 4-star recruit on every major recruiting service except for 24/7 Sports, and he also has a top list of schools, but unlike Hampton, who's got 7, Hester has 6, and Syracuse is on that list of 6 schools, along with Florida, Miami, Auburn, Georgia, and Iowa. So again, you can infer based on that list of schools that this is a big-time recruit. And he also has a commitment date set. It's a little bit after Messiah Hampton. It's on July 1st. So that's more than a month from now. So there's still time. It appears that the University of Florida is the favorite to land CJ Hester, according to multiple recruiting analysts out there. But Syracuse could swoop in because, like Messiah Hampton, they also have that official visit. It's going to be from June 6th to June 8th, and he's actually visiting Florida a week earlier. So timing is very interesting here. Florida appears to be the favorite. They're getting that visit right before Syracuse. We'll see what Syracuse has to say after he visits Florida. Overall, I would love if Syracuse could land at least one of CJ Hester or Messiah Hampton. That being said, there are plenty of other recruits to keep an eye on, even if they don't land one of them. 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell from Florida. He's committing on July 5th, and we know that Syracuse is firmly in the mix to land him. There's also near consensus 4-star edge rusher Carter Gooden, who's visiting Syracuse from June 13th to the 15th, and rivals 4-star Hakeem Satterwhite, I believe he's a defensive back, is scheduled to visit Syracuse this weekend. So perhaps the Orange could land a commitment from Satterwhite. So there's a lot going on with football recruiting here on the Syracuse campus. And of course, for more football recruiting updates, eventually over the course of the offseason and when Syracuse starts landing more commits, we will, of course, have football recruiting expert Brian Smith to talk about these commits more in depth. But that is your football recruiting update here to start this Memorial Day episode. Now, coming up here on this podcast, we will shift gears to talking about this upcoming roster and how Syracuse still has 2 open scholarships remaining. And we'll talk about how Syracuse can use them next on Locked On Syracuse. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and folks, we still got plenty to talk about here on today's show. We are about to discuss how Syracuse has 2 open scholarships remaining and where they could still look to add to their roster if they so choose. But before that, just want to shout out all those who subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. And if you haven't done so already, I'd really appreciate if you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. Let's get back to this episode. They have a couple of open scholarships remaining, and this is according to 24/7 Sports Insider Mike McAllister. Now, for context, last season, Syracuse football, I believe they made their final roster addition on May 24th, and that was getting Will Nixon from Washington. But with the open spots, Syracuse could still feasibly add to its roster. 103 of 105 scholarships remaining, assuming that that limit is increased. If it's not increased, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? So I think linebacker could be a position of interest for Syracuse football. They've added 2 inside linebackers this offseason. Fran Brown Jr., obviously the son of Fran Brown from St. Francis, and Gary Bryant from South Dakota. However, when I examine the roster and all the position groups, I would not consider linebacker as of right now a position of strength. And keep in mind that Syracuse is trying to replace not 1, but 2 all-conference players who were at linebacker last season. You got Marlo Wax and you got Justin Barron, who are both in the National Football League now. Pretty sure you've heard of the National Football League. Those are where the best players go after college. So those are pretty good players, the fact that they're in the National Football League, and Syracuse is trying to replace them. Right now, the top 3 linebackers, or I should say inside linebackers for Syracuse football next season, appear to be some veterans. You got Derek McDonald, Anwar Sparrow, and then there's also Gary Bryant. Plus, you got a true freshman in Antoine Delorier, who could see significant playing time as a true freshman. My thoughts on this unit are this. Number 1, I guess, is a positive, right? There is a foundation of starting experience in that linebacking unit. It's not a unit that necessarily lacks experience, right? Derek McDonald, he's played in 37 games for Syracuse football in his career, and he has started 26 of them, including 7 starts this past season. Anwar Sparrow, he's played in 40 games for Syracuse football, and he has made 4 career starts. One of them was last season, and that came against Stanford. So it's not like Syracuse has no experience at the linebacker spot. We'll talk about how the cornerback room is essentially the opposite, where they really do lack experience at cornerback. But my other thought is someone's got to step up in that inside linebacking unit. It's part of the reason why I think that maybe they should add 1 more inside linebacker if they can in the transfer portal, because the other linebackers, aside from the guys that we just mentioned, Derek McDonald and Anwar Sparrow, are Delorier and Bryant. Bryant is coming from an FCS school. FCS is a lot different than FBS. For those that don't quite understand, Syracuse plays in the FBS. That's where all the top colleges in college football play. So basically all the schools that you've heard of, like the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Floridas and the Ohio States and even in the ACC, right? That's FBS football. Then there's FCS, that is a step below. Think of it like Division I basketball, high major versus Division I basketball, mid-major, right? Think of it like that. And FCS, it's just different. It's a different animal going from FCS to FBS. And Delorier is a true freshman. Now, I'm not saying all this stuff to say, hey, I don't think Antoine Delorier is going to be good, or that Gary Bryant coming from South Dakota is not going to be good for Syracuse football, because I can't really make a judgment on that. But that's, I guess, the point. You can't really make a judgment on either of those 2 players because they have not proven anything at the FBS level. So the big question with them is this: can at least one of those 2 players step up and be quality inside linebackers next season? Because look, let's do the breakdown here, all right? You already got Derek McDonald and Anwar Sparrow, but there's a clear ceiling with those guys. If both of the linebackers, Antoine Delorier and Gary Bryant, are good, well, then suddenly inside linebacker is a strength for Syracuse football. If at least one of them pans out right away in 2025, then I would say the linebacker unit at least is average. It'll at least be serviceable for this upcoming season. But if neither of them are able to elevate to that FBS power conference football level, all of a sudden inside linebacker is a weakness for Syracuse football. So overall, I think it would be ideal if Syracuse could add one more inside linebacker with one of its open scholarships remaining. That being said, I scoured through 24/7 Sports transfer portal, top players overall available. There aren't really any inside linebackers left. There just isn't. Now, you could get someone from a different position and try to convert him. That's not unheard of. I mean, Justin Barron was doing that this past season. So maybe that's a route that Syracuse could go. But obviously, at this point, not necessarily ideal that there aren't any true, real inside linebackers available at this point. Now I throw it over to you. You think inside linebacker is a strength for Syracuse, a weakness for Syracuse? Should they look to add one more linebacker? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Now, coming up, I mentioned how with the linebacking unit, particularly with McDonald and Sparrow, how there's experience there. Well, with Syracuse's defensive backs, specifically corner, they don't really have that experience. And we'll discuss that next on Locked On Syracuse. Another position group where Syracuse could look to add in the transfer portal. Yes, they could still add in the transfer portal. There is no set commit date for any of these guys remaining in the portal. Once you're in the portal, you stay in the portal, is cornerback. And unlike linebacker, where a lot of most of the guys are gone, they're all gone, right? There are actually a couple of cornerbacks that are available in the transfer portal, and perhaps the most intriguing corner that is available is Purdue's Markevius Brown. I stand 24/7 Sports earlier today, like I mentioned, and I believe that Brown is actually the top overall player in the portal left. He's ranked 532 in the portal overall. That includes players that are already committed. And I think that just shows how dry the portal is now. There aren't many players that are actually available. Most of them have already committed, but you still have 2 open scholarships remaining, so you could still feasibly add in the portal if there's a guy that you like, right? Let's recap what Syracuse so far has done with corner this offseason. They've added one so far in the portal. They got Georgia's Chris Peel, and that was in early May. So that was just a few weeks ago. They lost Jaden Bellamy and Marcellus Barnes in the portal. Clarence Lewis, who was the team's top corner a year ago, graduated and was an undrafted free agent signing with the Tennessee Titans. Now, here's the thing with the cornerback unit. It's very, very young. Perhaps Syracuse's best corner next year is true freshman consensus 4-star recruit Demetres Samuel Jr. Now, I also believe that Samuel is going to get some reps at wide receiver, which is leading a lot of people to say, hey, that kind of sounds like Travis Hunter. Remember Travis Hunter from Colorado, who was just the second overall pick in the NFL draft, who he was an All-American corner and an All-American wide receiver? Well, maybe that can be Demetres Samuel Jr. For more context, though, Travis Hunter was the number 1 overall recruit in the country in his recruiting cycle. But hey, wouldn't that be awesome if Demetres Samuel could be anything close to a guy like Travis Hunter? But he's probably going to be the team's top corner this upcoming season. He's a true freshman. And then after that, you got true sophomore in Davian Kerr, who appeared in 8 games last season, and he started 4 of them. Actually, it was the final 4 games of Syracuse's season last year for Davian Kerr. There's also rivals, true freshman, 4-star corner Caleb Singleton out of Florida as well, just like Demetres Samuel. And finally, we get to who Syracuse actually added in the transfer portal in Georgia's Chris Peel, who was a 4-star recruit in 2023 and enters next season as a redshirt sophomore. He's appeared in 5 games over 2 seasons with Georgia, and he's got 2 career tackles. So That's a lot of inexperience right there. So I'm not sitting here calling the cornerbacks of Syracuse bad because, again, just because you have inexperience doesn't mean that you're bad. It could mean that you're good. It's like we've talked about with basketball, how there can be question marks on the roster, but sometimes question marks could yield positive results. It's kind of like the corners. Yeah, inexperience, it's a question. It's a valid concern. It could still end up working out, right? And the good news with the corners is that there's talent. There's clearly talent there, right? Demetres Samuel Jr. is a consensus 4-star recruit. Even though he's a true freshman, consensus 4-star guy. That doesn't happen by accident. Chris Peel, who they brought in from Georgia, it didn't really work out at Georgia for him as a 4-star recruit, but you don't become a 4-star recruit by accident. You don't become a Georgia recruit by accident. So maybe he's got untapped upside and he could fulfill that with Syracuse football. Caleb Singleton, Rivals 4-star recruit, right? Davian Kerr started 4 games as a true freshman last year. I'd say that's pretty significant, right? How many of those guys are going to break out for this upcoming season? Hopefully you get at least 2. Hopefully 2 of those 4 guys that I mentioned, and there are more cornerbacks on the roster, hopefully 2 will end up working out for Syracuse next year. Because if 2 of them work out, well, those are your 2 top corners. There you go. Congratulations. It's not really much of a concern if 2 of them work out. That being said, hey, I don't think it would hurt to add 1 more cornerback to that room. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below if you think that Syracuse could use one of its final 2 scholarships on cornerback. Because to me, I don't think you can ever have enough corners. You can never have enough pass rushers. You can never have enough offensive linemen. You can never have enough receivers. And you can never have enough corners. Those are very valuable positions in football. I think if the opportunity presents itself, given Syracuse's cornerback room, I would not mind them adding another one to that unit, preferably someone who has more experience. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Maybe you feel a little bit differently than I do. So that just about does it. We did a football recruiting update at the top of the show, and we discussed how Syracuse can maybe use its final 2 spots on a linebacker and a cornerback to round out this offseason. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future, Syracuse basketball recently landed its 13th player on the roster, and we will discuss him tomorrow. He plays a pretty important position, and he's 7 feet tall. So I think people are going to like it. We'll discuss more tomorrow, though, and some future podcasts to not consider, I guess, but some future podcasts. I just can't guarantee you what day they will be released on. Syracuse football breakout candidates and Syracuse basketball breakout candidates, plus me and Brian Smith, football recruiting expert and the host of Locked On Seminoles. We're also discussing a potential crossover episode, which is why I don't know exactly which day every episode is going to be released, but that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape, and you can find the Portal Show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse. Helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.